backcountry Colorado, hiking, backpacking.
I did a lot of marathons. I was convinced to do some ultras.
Climbing, and I do filming and photography.
I just like the ultras because I love the community. I just think that everybody is so nice, whether they're the first place finishers or, you know, us that kind of mosey along.
Hi, I'm Kelly McConnell, and I'm sitting next to a lot of awesome people. But right now, we're here to talk to Clare Gallagher, who won Leadville in 2016. She was the second fastest woman to run Leadville. And just to give our listeners an idea of how fast she was, the next woman behind her was 2 hours behind her. Is that correct?
She's like, oh gosh, guys.
Yeah. Not to make her embarrassed or anything, but
Thank you.
She ran Leadville in 19 hours and 27 seconds. That's what I wrote in my notes. And then we're here with Olivia Hsu. She is a world-class climber and a yogi. And now she is integrating yoga and climbing into her world. And we're really excited to hear more about that and about some of the retreats that she has coming up.
And so for the Dispatch Radio listeners out there, we're maybe a little bit familiar with your story, Olivia. You were kind enough to hang out with us at the Go Society Adventure Fest. So thanks for coming back. Great to see you.
Great to see you guys too.
What has been new in your life since we last checked in?
God, when was that?
That was late summer of last year. You've been doing some retreat action, it sounds like.
Well, so up until January, I've been mostly traveling and teaching yoga for the most part. I think after I saw you guys, I went to California and taught for 2 months. And then since then, I've kind of been hanging out in Boulder with a few little side trips and little projects.
And we were excited to get these two together. Kelly, I thought it was interesting kind of, you've got Clare, just getting on the scene of ultra running. And then Olivia's just had this prolific kind of career as an outdoor adventurer and climber and yogi.
People often I actually just went and taught at the Women's Climbing Festival in Bishop, and I went up to the hot springs. I was sitting in there, and this guy looks at me and he's like, "How old are you?" And I was like, "Don't you know not to ask a woman her age?" And he was like, "Well, how old are you?" I was like, 40. And he was like, No. And I was like,
I didn't know that.
No, I'm 40. And he was like, no. And I was like, how old are you? And he was like, 27.
He was testing the waters to see if it was okay to hit on you.
Definitely.
And so this is the same climbing fest, the Bishop Climbing Fest. So we've got Abby Weiss here from Mountain Project. She just did a collab story with us from the Outdoor Climbing Fest. That was a pretty cool event to see so many women out there and to hear a lot of the stories. I found it personally really interesting to hear how women can really excel, beyond what they thought they could by being with other women. So that was kind of part of what we wanted to bring together, is talk a little bit about being just badass outdoor women athletes. And I also think it's interesting, kind of the different generational. Olivia, you were doing all this amazing stuff kind of pre-internet, right?
Oh yeah. My first climbing trip, I had to fax my parents to let them know I was still alive.
Wow.
Remember fax machines?
Crazy.
Claire, do you know what a fax machine is?
Maybe, but
She's like, I've heard of it. I've heard of it. I've seen it in email signatures. Fax number.
Fax is actually an abbreviation, I think, for fax missile or
Facsimile.
Facsimile. Well done. Facsimile. Yeah.
I listened to one of your podcasts with I think it's Julia Hamill. I don't think she's doing it anymore.
Hanlon.
Running on
Ohm.
Okay,
Yep.
Running on Ohm. So I used to be a big Running on Ohm fan in college, and when I was just sort of burned out of the track scene, I was ingesting every outside magazine I could, and that was maybe 5 years ago, which is so cool because I never thought I'd get to meet you. And that was still sort of, social media was still big then, but it's funny. I don't think I said that over. Maybe I said it over email, but you've been in inspiration of my life, which is
so we were connected back then.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
What's funny, you guys? So I listened to Running on Ohm as well, and I only listened to 2 or 3 of them, and she was one of them. And very soon after, I met her at Go Society, and I never thought I would meet her. And then Russ got in touch with Julia because we found out that Running on Ohm had shut down, which was really disappointing because it was one of the only ones that actually kept me interested. Besides yours, Danielle.
We got Daniel now. We got the Just
No,
Curious show.
Now
filling
we
the
have a
void.
new one taking over.
This is awesome, Daniel.
Anyway, so she is starting to do yoga retreats.
Super cool.
And we talked over email with her about connecting all of you since you just did a running retreat. Is that correct? Or are you doing one soon with some people?
I'm doing one. I might have done one that I'm not aware of.
I don't think so. I just read.
Claire has a busy life.
No, I just have a bad memory.
I didn't read the date.
You should see her passport. She travels a lot. A lot of time zones.
So
Did I show you my passport?
She doesn't remember talking to me. It's hilarious.
Yeah, no, I'm doing one in June outside at the Shambhala Mountain Center in June 10th.
nice.
It's a running meditation retreat. I'm really excited for it. Yeah, mindfulness.
So that seems like a natural connection. The three of them, the Julia, Claire, and Olivia brainstorming on cool yoga running retreat stuff, right? Make that happen?
Except I'm not a yoga expert.
Yeah,
Well,
you're
we
gonna bring
have
the
one.
running.
I know.
you'll have two.
I can't even be in the room.
We could start doing one.
Yeah.
So Olivia, could you just tell us a little bit about your experience with retreats? We did talk to Julia about asking you a little bit more about that. And I know that you are starting to do, you've been doing them with climbing, or is this something that's, okay.
So, I mean, I'm actually going to Spain in 2 days for a month to climb. And then at the very end, I'm doing a yoga and climbing retreat with my friend Chris Sharma. And I did one last year with him too. So, I mean, we live in a place, I think, where we're fortunate to have yoga, like, period. And often when I travel, people are dying to do yoga and they actually don't have access to yoga. And I think people here maybe can experience that a little bit more because, you know, if you climb in Boulder, you can go to a yoga class. But what I found was whenever I traveled, people were always, you know, I'd be at the crag and someone would find out or like had seen a video or something and they'd be like, oh, I heard you're a yoga teacher, right? And you're with Prana or whoever. And can you teach us yoga? And I'd be like, well, okay, yeah, tomorrow's my rest day. Yeah, sure, kind of thing. And so over time, I was kind of like, oh, you know, this is kind of a perfect fit. Also, just purely, I think climbing and yoga have a lot of similarities in terms of body awareness and movement. And I mean, yoga is great for everything in your life, period. But those two, I think there's kind of more of that connection with like sort of movement and your breath and that kind of thing.
Claire, do you get any of the yoga or climbing or?
Yeah, I do some yoga just to increase my flexibility, but I know it's something I have to incorporate more into my training and just life because I meditate pretty regularly. But you know, combining the two, I think is really, it's a beautiful thing for our bodies and minds. And I'm really inspired by two of my North Face running teammates, Rory Bazio and Stephanie Howe, are really active yogi practitioners, yeah. And they're badass runners. So, you know, it's like, what are the best people doing? The best runners are pretty good at yoga. So I know that's something I need to get better at.
Do you recall, you mentioned listening to the Running on Ohm, listening to Olivia's interview. Do you recall anything that kind of stuck out, or you said you were looking forward to meeting her? I'd be interested to hear kind of what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I just remember your Australia, like you're very international, and I think that's really fascinating. Just because travel is like one of my biggest values, and like all I remember is like you being in you moving to Australia, right?
Yeah, so I went to Australia for college and grad school.
Okay, yeah. And wait, you played field hockey?
I played field hockey.
Okay, I was just like, that's so crazy. You know, like here's this field sport athlete, and I played lacrosse growing up, like pretty competitively, and then like I kind of just stopped getting better at lacrosse, and I was like good at running. So it just, you know, I that was younger in my life, but I thought that was so badass.
And I actually used to run. Like I used to be like an obsessive runner. and I played field hockey, and then I started climbing. And I think I just got to a point where, there's only so many calories you can like hold in your body. And so I was like, I would like run 10 miles every day. I would like go to field hockey training for the university. And then I started rock climbing, and
Something had to give.
At the end of the day, I was like, okay, I'm exercising like 7 hours a day.
I can't eat this much frosting. No.
Yeah, pretty much, Actually, I was telling Botsy here, I was like, we were like eating gummy bears, and I was like, I used to eat like a whole bag every day. I should have diabetes.
So another thing that you and Claire have in common, then, your love for the sweets.
Yeah. Like I was like, I should be a fat person.
Eating gummy bears?
Oh, this is going to give me
like 5 pounds of them.
Yeah.
So Olivia, what is your retreat?
I'm gonna pause for a upslope
Oh.
beer.
Nice.
For some reason, I thought you could shut off the recording. Olivia, what does the retreat look like? You're a fantastic climber, and the guy that you're going with, what's his name again? He's like one of the best climbers in the world. So are these climbers really well accomplished climbers, or what types of people come to your
It's
retreat?
sort of a mix bag, really. Like we've had, people who are really pushing their limits and climbing at a higher level. And then people who aren't, but I think everyone can get the same value out of this kind of retreat. And it's really kind of like an immersion of climbing and yoga. So if you think about I think everyone here has periods where they go mountain biking or running or climbing, where you're there for a week doing it every day, and you can really drop in to like what you're doing. As opposed to if you're working and you're distracted by other things, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds like my life.
So it's kind of like the same thing with yoga and climbing, where I found a lot of people after the 4 days, or 3 days was last year, but this year it's 4. They were just like, oh my God, I see such an improvement on my climbing after 4 days of like doing yoga every day and climbing, versus like maybe when you're here in Boulder, you climb, but maybe you do yoga once like during that whole week or something.
And do they feel that way more of the mental aspect of it, of being more mindful and more concentrated on the rock and more with their bodies, or in the flexibility of doing yoga and how their bodies feel?
I think probably it's a combination of both, because yoga really taps into your parasympathetic nervous system. And when you think about climbing is a very sympathetic nervous system activity. Like you're like, oh, I hope I don't blow that clip and I might fall 15 feet, So the whole time you're kind of like working in this range where you're in
Stress
like a
mode.
more stressed state, So yoga really counters that. And so if you think about performance, it's like if your heart rate's lower, then your body's functioning better,
And Claire knows about dangerous situations, not falling off of rock cliffs necessarily, but will you tell us a little bit about your first ultra run? Because I just think that's kind of a crazy little story.
Yeah. So I was living in Thailand right after I graduated undergrad, and my first ultra was an 80K through hill tribe villages in northern Thailand. So like right near Myanmar and Laos. And yeah, the biggest concern of that race was the poisonous snakes in that region are out of control. It's the most poisonous cobras, vipers in the world. So this was the inaugural running of the race. It's hilarious because the race director, he's British, and he's like, not that has anything to do with the story, but
Random fact.
yeah. He's like, okay, guys, if you get caught by a snake, if you get bit by a snake, you have to take a photo of it because we need to know which antivenom to use. And the chance, you'd actually get picked up in time.
Yeah.
It's just like, whatever.
You're like just better off cutting your leg off.
Yeah. Yeah, like the day before the race, 9 foot, 3 meter snake. It wasn't that poisonous, but was caught by a local super badass Thai dude. Puts it up right in front of like the lodge. We were staying at a little backpackers lodge. Hey guys, have a great race. But
Just
yeah.
messing with you, just trying to get in your head, or
I don't know. I don't know. I wish I spoke fluent Thai so I could understand things better. But yeah, but it was fine. You know, you just have to be aware. I mean, the most danger, I was really close to getting bit by snakes. I lived in the South, and that's just like on the beach and stuff, and in the wet jungle. They're everywhere.
Just wait till you go to Australia.
Really? Yeah.
Makes you run faster.
Yeah. I don't have a phobia of snakes, luckily. So, yeah, that would be a bummer if, you know, if someone lived up there with this phobia.
So, Olivia, what I'm curious, kind of what goes through your mind when you see a kind of a new. Well, first of all, we've got Clare here. She's 25. She's just kind of emerging in the ultra marathon world, and we're kind of seeing the pattern of these athletes now. It's, she'll probably start as an ultra runner, and then she's already doing skimo, right? Like she's gonna be like expanding her repertoire, and she's already stated that she wants to travel internationally. That's the thing that really gets her going, at least right now. I'd wonder if you have any perspective to share, whether that might be helpful, or someone else kind of in her position right now, just starting out, that wants to kind of do the stuff that you've been doing.
Just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, it's awesome. It's rad. I mean, I never really thought that this would be what I would end up doing, really. I mean, I went to law school, and I thought, I mean, my parents live in Hong Kong, so I thought, yeah, I'm just going to go back and get some like job that I'm going to make tons of money, like working for Goldman Sachs or whatever. But at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? I kind of like climbing and doing yoga, and even teaching was something that like I didn't intend on doing. It just kind of happened, and I think in the end, it's like, I think we all have intuition. If you really listen to it, you can really find your true north.
And
Nice.
does that resonate with you, Claire?
Yeah, that's really inspiring to hear. Most of my close friends and peers a lot of them are working on Wall Street, and just I came from a really sort of high pressure college environment. So like a lot of them are working at Goldman Sachs. Yeah. And it's funny because, I'm probably making a thousandth of what they're making. You can't even like think of the fraction. It's so small. But yeah, like, I'm starting to jot out the number of times that, I'm asked advice like, well, how are you living this awesome life or whatever? And I'm like, oh, cool. It's like, I'm actually just doing what I want. Yeah. But a part of me is like, oh, how sustainable is this? And I know health is so fickle. And so I'm actually curious if you have you had times of serious injury and like how that's,
Oh, I had finger surgery like 2 years ago, and I had to I basically took like 4 months off of climbing. And that was like 2 years ago. And I think, yoga's really helped me like have the time off. Cause I think like whenever you're into like running or climbing, it's intense and you're really focused. And I think yoga's really helped me soften in that aspect and not be so attached, where like I see a lot of people who like climbing is everything. And at the end of the day, when they don't have climbing, then they don't have anything. And like to live your life like that, I think is a shame, And for me now, it's like the richness of my experiences are traveling and being with friends and, people I love, the most, really.
Yeah.
So
you can always do yoga or have these other.
And I think also just
pursuits,
the longevity, because I think when you're going hard, you're like, it's inevitable that you get injured and you can never be at the top forever, and for me, it's like, I want to be climbing and doing yoga until I'm like in my 60s or 70s, which I think is possible. So
yeah, that's really inspiring. And it shows that there is something about like getting on the mat. It's good to, I mean, just hear it, that's like the purpose of reminders in the first place. Like we all know this stuff, but hearing it, I think is really beneficial. The people who go to your retreats are lucky. I can see it.
Thanks.
So Claire, tell us, give us a little background, because you have had kind of experience. You bring up injury. You had experience. You ran in Princeton and experienced injury, and I know something recently kind of happened in the Grand Traverse, although I'm not sure how serious it is.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, yeah. I've had a lot of qualms with like pursuing ultra running professionally because I had full year-long injuries in college, and yeah, I just had to get an MRI on my femur because I thought I might have a stress fracture. So you just have to be really careful with bone and running, especially these like really boring. They're not like sexy injuries to get a stress fracture. It's like, but I'd be kind of SOL if I had that. I would be out for like 3 months, so that would ruin my next race, which was Western States. But in this time, in the last like 3 weeks, I've actually been like kind of going crazy because I'm like, this is it. Like, this is the moment, like I knew it. I'm going to get injured as a professional ultra runner because I've been relatively healthy for the last 2 years, like since college or whatever. Yeah. And then I'm like, this is why I need another job, blah, blah, blah. And then I've noticed, I'm like, wow, I can actually still pursue, projects in this field of like outdoorsmanship and and storytelling and without necessarily churning out 80-mile weeks like
And so, for example, tell us about your little project in Utah, if that is a good example.
Oh, that I'm going to do? Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Oh yeah. So that came up in the last few weeks, which I was really excited because I'm like, oh, if I am injured, I'm going to attempt an FKT of this thing called the Whirl, which is a 36-mile.
It's the Wasatch.
Don't tell me what it stands for. Don't ask me what it stands for.
Anybody? It's like all
WURL.
It's this huge ridged line.
Yeah, 36 miles. It's really aesthetic. So from Google Earth, it's basically a circle or a horseshoe on the Wasatch. So right outside Salt Lake City. And it's a lot of scrambling. So there's like very few actual running miles involved, but the insert running motion. Yeah. The FKT is held by this guy, Jared Campbell, and he's an ultra runner. And like his FKT is 16 hours and change. Alex Honnold, that took him 23 hours.
Okay.
So it's a cool space where climbers and runners are both doing it, but it definitely favors ultra runners. So yeah, the women's FKT
what was it? The Flatiron record is like by a runner.
Yeah.
We just learned that
it's Matthias, right?
Buzz had it for a while there. Buzz Burrell, we learned when we sat down in the kitchen with it. He had at various points in his life, he had the FKT for each of the Flatirons, and then he had all for doing all of them in one push. But and Sanitas too, yeah, but he's legendary. But they've all fallen by now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did that start, Claire? How did that idea pop into your head to do this?
I wish it was my idea, but no, it was the idea of a filmmaker named Tim Jones. I mean, I've heard of it before. People in Boulder have done it. Friend Derek Clemenson, he's an RMR guy, Rocky Mountain Runner guy. And yeah, so, I was approached and it worked well with my racing schedule. So I'm going to be training for this race called CCC, which is a shorter version of UTMB. Early September.
The ultra marathon
Des Mont Blanc. And it's very technical and a lot of vert. So it blends well to what I'll be doing at that time of year. So, that's the beauty of like, okay, I realize, I guess the point of this story, if I'm injured, I can look ahead, which is still okay. It's like I have a million books I want to read, I guess. Get stuff done.
And write. And you have sci-fi to write.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually think that like injuries are kind of like a little gift.
Nice. Yeah. To like reassess.
Yeah, like you discover, because sometimes for me, when I'm climbing all the time, it's like it takes up so much time that when I'm not climbing, I'm just oh, I have so much time to do these other things,
Call your so-and-so. Or
discover other things that, you might be passionate about, because I think like as humans, I don't think we're limited to just one thing, so.
Yeah.
And you also learn different ways to take care of yourself and how to balance your body more.
Right.
Don't you think?
For sure.
Yeah, there's always better ways of healing.
Well, we've got a trailer packed full here at the Studio Boulder. We got a live studio audience. I know we've got some folks that have questions for these ladies. So do we have an audience mic? Or? Here we go. All right. Who's up?
7:30.
Oh, no, I'm okay.
Abby or Chris, who wants to fire away? Introduce yourself, please.
Hey, I'm Abby Wise. I'm an editor at Mountain Project and Trail Run Project, which is very relevant right now. So I'm going to ask you, Claire, the question that I asked you on Facebook, which is we published a couple weeks ago just like a quick roundup of women who are changing the face of running. And that means everything from like conservationists to women who are changing like body positive and things like that. So I know I missed a few. So who do you think is changing the face of running or trail running and why?
Yeah, cool. Thanks. That's a great question. I was strangely enough asked this question by an outside writer for an outside piece last week, and basically like what about activism, and my answer is the same. Stephanie Hsu is a ultra runner, huge idol of mine, and we happen to be North Face teammates now. And I'm racking my brain. I'm like, who is really, really up on the climate change awareness scene and on the public lands, protect our public lands world, and who's locally active. And Stephanie's constantly doing stuff in Bend. She lives in Oregon. And speaking of injury, she just had like gnarly foot surgery last year. She wasn't running for a year.
Yeah.
Like, this is a girl who's won Western States, and so like she's filled her life with activism, and yet now she's training for Western States, and she's still doing it, and she has a million things going on. She's like has a like pack and a sock, so she's like total badass in the running world, but she still makes time to bring these conversations up. When so many people, I know it's probably the same with running, Olivia. When you're talking about running or climbing, it's like what people want to talk about, but it's hard to bring up these other topics we're passionate about, because it takes like an effort, because we could just talk running and climbing all day. At least that's what I've sort of like noticed. And Stephanie brings stuff up that's not necessarily on the agenda. So yeah, that's my answer.
Josh Stevens, a professional runner. I'm going to go back to Claire, if that's okay. From a athletic standpoint, are there any lessons learned from your win at Leadville that you're going to apply directly to your training blocks and execution at Western?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I training in Leadville. Before Leadville, I repeatedly sprained my ankle really, really badly. Like, I'm talking fat ankle, like gross. And it got to the point, maybe it was on my 5th sprain in July, in Leadville, it's end of August. And I had to take like 4 days off. It's like, you just got to wait till the swelling goes down until you can run again. And I realized those times of forced rest, it wasn't like a surgery or anything, but definitely ended up helping my Leadville. Like, I was just so ready. Yeah. And so I'm trying to apply that now. I'm not trying to sprain my ankle. I'm trying to put in, rest days.
And yoga.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yoga. So I used to sprain my ankles like all the time.
Really?
Like hiking into climbing areas, like in Taos and like all that kind of stuff. And then I swear to God, since I've started doing yoga, I don't sprain my ankles anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, and Lori Nakauchi, part of our dispatch crew, swears by it too. She says she's a long time ultra runner, hasn't had any injuries,
Since
historically,
wow.
and she says she notices a huge difference when she takes the yoga off, particularly on rolling her ankles.
I've never heard that. That's amazing.
Yeah, because
so
a lot of the
useful.
standing postures make you stabilize. Like the way you do the postures requires a lot of proprioception. And so your ankles are constantly activating to keep your balance.
Yeah.
So.
Nice. Thanks.
Jeremy Hendricks, and my question's for both of you. Which way do you put your toilet paper roll? Over the top or around the back?
I do it the correct way, which is the flap on top.
Over the top?
I also do it the correct way.
Nice. Round of applause. Good work, guys. Yeah.
And I actually change it when I see it and it's the wrong way.
Yeah. It's actually a legitimate pet peeve. Yeah.
So I'm Chris Van Leuven. I'm a freelance writer. Claire, how do you recover from your big races? What's your...
Yeah, it depends on, if I've had like any mechanical issues, which is a bummer because that requires a lot more rest. But, I eat a lot. I think like getting those calories back, like however you were able to get the calories back when you were in Australia, probably took like years. You basically, you have to just, so much of it has to do with nutrition, actually. I don't weigh myself, so that's often a tool that runners use to make sure they're getting that nutrition back after a 20-hour effort or something. Because a lot of people don't realize if they're like, 20,000 calories deficit and they just are like, oh, I feel fine. I'm not that hungry, and then like 3 months later, they're overtrained or something. So that's something I keep in mind. Like I've err on the side of like gorging, because it's actually really, really bad if you get like 6 months down the road and you're like, crap, I did not replenish my stores.
Have you thought about like a ketogenic? Have you looked into that ketogenic diet and ketosis and that kind of thing?
I have a little bit. And Rob Carr, an ultra runner, he's funny. He's like, I don't eat breakfast just because like I don't need it or whatever. He's like, so a lot of my runs are in ketosis. That's about as much as I know of it.
Sounds scientific.
Yeah. Do you practice ketosis?
Well, I mean, I don't really do endurance sports. And I've heard that ketogenic diet is like good for endurance type of activities more so. Just because like the source of fuel that you're using is better. And I heard through a podcast that just like using fats versus carbs, to do with the sort of longevity too, that it's healthier for you in the long term as well.
Yeah. Interesting.
Olivia, I have a question for you. This is Abby again, podcast people. So you talked a little bit about how practicing yoga helped you, like with your spraining your ankle when you're approaching climbs and stuff like that. I'm curious, what else is in that relationship between yoga and climbing for you? Does one impact the other, or are they both equal? I mean, and how do those work together?
Like the percentage of time that I spend doing one, or like the relationship,
like lessons you've learned between the two.
So it's kind of interesting because I think like I've been climbing for over 20 years and I've been doing yoga, like really doing yoga. Like, so a lot of people say I do yoga, but they do like yoga like an hour a week or something. So I've been
That's
doing
me, guilty.
So I've been doing Ashtanga yoga, which is like, you practice 2.5 hours, 6 days a week kind of thing. And I've been doing that since kind of the beginning because I just happened to.
So, ladies, if you want to be 40 and have shocked faces of gentlemen who can't believe you, maybe a couple hours of yoga a day is what you're saying.
But so a lot of people who start doing yoga often complain. Like I have climbing friends who are like, well, I'm going to compete tomorrow and I can't do yoga because I'm going to be sore. And so I think when people, it's like doing anything new, like your body needs to get used to it. So if I were to start running, I would get sore and then my climbing would suck, because my legs hurt or whatever. And so for me, I've been doing the two kind of like in unison for quite a long time. So I feel like my body's been able to adapt, but I for sure have periods where like, I'll climb more and then that'll make me really tight for yoga or like I'll do yoga more or something. So like I think of balance not as 50-50. Like I think of it as kind of a scale that's moving continuously where maybe I dedicate like 70% focused on yoga, 30 climbing, and then sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's 70 climbing, 30 yoga kind of thing. And I think they help like in terms of there's definitely like more awareness. And I think just when you start to practice yoga, it just becomes more integrated into your daily life. But also like when I'm climbing, I have moments where I might be run out, get somewhere, and my heart rate's just, racing, and I'm able to really drop my heart rate down, and just kind of reel it all back in. So
Is it one way? I always think of just yoga helping you be a better climber. Does climbing help you be a better yogi?
I think so, because like when you think about strength and flexibility, like most people who are strong are not flexible, and then most people who are flexible are not strong. And so I think a lot of yoga people can get a lot of benefit from climbing, because if they're more flexible, then they can get more strength in their arms and their core and things like that.
Olivia, you did a series recently with Yoga Glow, which is an online yoga resource, and that was specifically for climbers, correct?
Yes.
And do you speak to a lot of this in that?
Yeah. So basically, I designed 50 classes or maybe more that live on the Yoga Glow site.
Oh, wow.
And so the classes range from 5, 10, I think 15, half an hour, 45 minutes. And so, I've like a 5-minute class for shoulders, 5-minute class for hips, because most people's attention span is quite short. So, a lot of people don't want to sit through an hour class. They just want a quick class for their shoulders. So they can kind of piece together the classes that suit them, or, and every person's different. So someone might have tighter shoulders than someone else, so they can do all the shoulder classes or whatever.
Yeah, I love that you did that. That's great.
Yeah,
it's a good way to bring in some new people to yoga, to have those short classes.
For sure. And also the thing is like, I say, yeah, yoga is great for everything. But the thing is, I'm beginning to see that there's more people who climb. And the more that I'm looking into like that relationship between yoga and climbing, not all yoga is suitable for climbers, because climbers have tighter shoulders. And I've seen people go to just general yoga classes and hurt themselves because they're trying to do wild thing or whatever, and they're just stiff as a board, and they're like, oh, I just like jacked my back up in yoga.
Well, we've packed this trailer. I think we've got this thing warmed up enough for a little sesh. What do you guys think, huh?
Hot yoga.
Have you ever tried free diving?
I have.
You're like, okay,
Yeah.
because just like the because you could probably hold your breath pretty long if I had to guess.
I was able to do like 20 meters down and up. So
nice, yeah. You could probably go more.
Yeah. And in the end, it's a mental thing.
Totally.
So,
well, and the pressure on your chest ends up being
physics as well.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Just because like of the, I'm assuming, do you practice like triangular breathing to get your heart rate
well, so
down?
there's something called pranayama, which is controlled breathing.
Okay.
So it's just a way of like breathing in alternate nostrils.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before. Nice.
Yeah. So then you breathe through one nose and then out the other, and then you do holds in between. So you might, hold for half a minute.
Yeah.
And then you exhale.
Yeah.
And then you hold on the exhale kind of thing.
Yeah. Static apnea.
Yeah.
It's in your future, probably. Yeah. That's sweet.
Well, Daniel Bedell from the Just Curious show, what are you curious about right now? Other than not nodding off because you just had a child. Congratulations, by the way, on your new baby girl.
Yeah, this is nice to not be changing a diaper or trying to get a nap in. I was curious kind of about you. They've brought up a little bit, you're 40-ish or 28, whatever you say at the moment. But, a lot of the climbers I see making records and stuff now are these girls who are like teens, like 12 to 15 or 16 or whatever. I'm curious how you sort of compete with that, and maybe not in a literal sense, maybe not in a one-on-one competition, but are there things that being older is like, helpful that when you're a teenager, you're lacking when it comes to climbing and doing projects and routes and like things like that, or is being like 16 the only way to be amazing at being a climber?
I mean, you know, if you think about climbing, it's kind of like gymnastics. Like you don't really see like 40-year-olds like in the vault or whatever. But I think, you know, it's like if you think about climbing, it's like there's so many people who climb. So, you know, if you're like a 40-year-old person who's discovering climbing, maybe a 12-year-old's not that inspiring to you. But if you see someone who's 40 or 50 still crushing and climbing, then that can be really inspirational, you know? I mean, like, I think one of the best things living in Boulder is that we have this rich history of climbing. Like, I remember the first time moving here and climbing with Lynn Hill, and I was like, oh my God, it's Lynn Hill. You freed the, you know, like for me, it was like amazing, you know?
Freed the nose.
Yeah. And basically, like, there are a lot of people like Lynn. Bobby Bensman lives here. Like, there's so many iconic climbers, you know, and they're still crushing. And for me, it's inspirational to see people who are older than I am still climbing. You know, I go to Spain and I have friends who are like 60 and they're still climbing 514, you know, and I'm like, that's awesome, you know?
Yeah, climbing's unique in that you can keep your skill level pretty high.
Yeah.
Unlike running, you're like pretty much guaranteed to get slower after a certain point. And so that's really cool.
And that's what I was saying.
Awesome,
And that's what I
by
was
the
saying
way.
with like yoga is the same too, because climbing and yoga are skill-based sports.
Mhm.
And so neurologically, you're wired, you're just strengthening the firing and like the movement patterns, you know? And so like my teachers here, Richard Freeman and Mary Taylor, they're inspirational because they're like still doing yoga and they're like 65. And, you know, if you see the stuff that they're doing, you're just like, what? You're
Right.
65? You could put your feet on your head? Like what? You know?
So awesome.
So what kind of climbing? So you say you're going to go climb with your buddy Chris Sharma in Spain. I had a chance to meet him a long time ago at an OR. What just a fun, cool guy he is. But what kind of climbing will you be doing with him? Like, what are you doing in climbing right now?
So right now I'll go to Spain and I'll just climb for the first half of the month. And then at the end, Chris and I are doing this yoga and climbing workshop. So basically we're just coaching climbing and I teach yoga for it. Yeah.
So when you're just doing your personal climbing though, like what type of, you know, are you setting your sights on big projects or just kind of what's
Yeah, so like right now I would probably go over and like Spain, there's just so much climbing. Like there's a crag called Margalef and I was there like last year and I looked through the guidebook and I was like, wow, this one wall has more hard climbs than all of the US. You know, like that one crag, like there was one wall and there was like, 25 514s all in a row, and that was just one wall. And then you go to the next wall and there's another wall with another, 5 more. And that's just one climbing area, So I think sometimes, just we don't have as much rock here that it can be a little limiting. And I've fallen into the trap where like, I don't really play the numbers game, but like, you can put a ceiling on, what you can do in terms of like, okay, I go to rifle and I try, whatever routes there. And then I think I can't do a certain grade. And I had a trip once where I went to Spain and basically was like, okay, I'm here for 2 weeks and I can probably do whatever this grade. And the whole time I looked at another route and I was like, oh, that 14B looks really great, but I probably can't do that in 2 weeks, So I kind of like went for the low hanging fruit.
Yeah, I went for the easy, the 513.
Well, it was like a 13D, but I was like, maybe I can do that in 2 weeks. So basically I tried that and it wasn't really my style. I didn't really like it that much. And then at the, my last day, I was like, oh, screw it. The draws are on that route. I'm going to go up that route, because it looks awesome. Went up it and got to the top and was like, oh my God, I should have been trying this the whole time. But in my mind, I had put this cap on what I could do, and there's so much more rock that, like for me, I'm more of an endurance-based climber. So longer routes that are, 45, 50 meters long suit me better.
Wait, I'm curious about something. What's the longest you've worked on like one project climb?
So I'm a bad person to talk to about that because so I started off trad climbing. So the first like 3 years that I climbed, I basically was just, putting gear in and I never fell. And then I started sport climbing and whatnot, but I had traveled to Europe a lot. And so I would on-site mostly. And I don't know if I have to educate people. So on-siting is when you climb something the first time. And then red pointing is where you rehearse the moves and then you finally do the climb in one push without falling. And so usually people tend to red point because you know the moves. And so like people's harder climbs are usually red points. But for me, I was always into like experiencing more. So I didn't want to go to a new crag like Sayus and try one route the whole time I was there. So I would on-site things, and then it's like basically when I end up running out of things to on-site that I have to red point. So for me, my harder sends, I've probably done, like maybe in 6 tries or something, or so over the course of 3 or 4 days. And part of this trip is to find kind of a greater project that I can dedicate a little more time to. Yeah.
How long have you been on like one wall?
One wall?
Yeah. Do you is that common to think about?
Oh, well, I mean, people do multi-pitch climbs and things like that.
That's
So
true.
I don't know, maybe like 14 hours or something to climb something.
Really?
Because it's like maybe 10 pitches and you start at like, I don't know, 2 a.m. and you climb until like whenever.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
what's the most time you spent running?
19 hours.
That was the longest run.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was your Leadville one.
Hey, it's Corey from Dispatch. I have a follow-up question sort of related to what Abby asked. Claire, you sort of mentioned, and we've gone down the rabbit hole of specificity on climbing and running. So what's on your personal agenda that you might want to talk about when we're not stuck talking about climbing and running? What might be at the top of your list?
Oh, definitely just what's happening to our environment, the onslaught of these places we love. Everyone in this room is super stoked on the outdoors. Most people in this state and even people in this country and this world, they might not realize it, but they actually really love the outdoors. And yeah, it's a bummer. Sometimes it's really paralyzing. I'm not a climatologist, so it's not like my every single day is working to help climate change, but I'm grateful you asked because now we're talking about it. It's just another drop in the bucket, it's reminding ourselves that this is super real and a lot of people are going to go hungry in the next 50 years because of it, mainly due to people who eat fish as their main source of protein. And I studied coral reefs in college, so that's it's constantly in my mind. As soon as reefs go, fish go, and people go hungry. So it's not necessarily that we're just going to have less powder to ski. Yeah, not to get really, really dark, but yeah.
How about you, Olivia?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Just, we've been talking about running and climbing specifically. What, if you had your personal agenda to bring to this or something about the outdoors or, just whatever you might be talking about if it wasn't just, what the pitch was.
Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of climbing related and yoga related, but I love like doing things like teaching at the Women's Climbing Festival. And I do a lot of things with other nonprofits when I have time. So there's like an event coming up in Estes Park, actually. So I work with the Women's Wilderness Institute, which is a amazing, wonderful nonprofit. And it's run by women for women, bringing women into the outdoors. So they run a lot of programs for teenage girls. So people have, women have access to that. So whenever I have time, I help support them in that.
Cool. And what was that called? Or did you already?
Women's Wilderness Institute.
This background noise.
All right, guys. Well, before we hit 100 degrees in here, I think we're going to wrap. Olivia Hsu and Clare Gallagher, thank you so much for stopping by the trailer, the Airstream here at the Studio Boulder. Thank you to our host, the Studio Boulder, our new beer sponsor, Upslope Beer and Henry Wood. And thank you to Jessica for being here with Frosted. Everybody check out Frosted if you like yummy, non-fructose syrup containing sugary goodness for your ultra runs or whatever you need to get out for. Check out Frosted. Any other thank yous I'm missing, Corey? Mountain Project. Check out our collab for sure. Mountain Project. You can hear all about the Women's Climbing Clinic. Josh Stevens and the Heron Project. You can look that up. Anything else?
Michelle and Planet EI.
Michelle and Planet EI, our Clare Gallagher's sci-fi contest winner. Yay. Let's go celebrate that, guys.
The Good Kind. Thank you.
The Good Kind Band. Thank you for being here. Actually, speaking of, let's go listen to The Good Kind.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's do it.
It was super nice talking to you, Olivia.
You too.
Thanks.